my nigga? Huh? You from what?
What you say?
You, huh? What do you mean, my nigga? Okay.
What happened, bro?
Yeah. What do you?
What happened, bro?
Okay, but yo, fam.
Are you from
Yo,
this
listen.
side, bro? Are you from this side, bro?
Yeah, he's from what?
Same little nigga, you know he getting pressed again. And this all bad nigga be sniffing on purse, but I bet he won't sniff on a perk again. I ain't playing no games when I spot me a op, yeah, you know how rock, I'm spinning round. They be ducking these shots.
Borgella was shot while he sat in his car. They say he had just eaten at Jake and Joe's, and the two suspects appear to have been waiting for him in the parking lot. This was not a random attack.
They be talking that shit, acting like I'm a bitch, and they know I be sending them shots. And I'm just warming up.
Cold December night in 2020, a quiet suburb just outside of Boston became the scene of a calculated execution that shocked the community and left a young man dead. But for those who knew the streets and the real tension brewing beneath the surface, it wasn't just a random act of violence. It was payback. Lloyd Borgella, 26 of Roslindale, was known in the streets as LV Slim. To the courts and media, he was just another victim in a tragic case of gun violence. But behind that headline was a deeper story, one rooted in long-standing neighborhood, beef, pride, and street politics that eventually spiraled into deadly consequences. LV Slim wasn't a passive figure in this conflict. Months before the murder, he made a bold move that put a target on his back. He pulled up to Hyde Park, a neighborhood where he was definitely not welcomed, and went live on Instagram, talking tough, calling people out, and making his presence known. It was a bold stunt, one that crossed lines and challenged reputations. And in the streets, reputation is everything. During that IG Live, shots were fired at him. He made it out, but instead of backing down, Lloyd doubled down. He recorded and released a diss track, sending a clear message to his rivals. He wasn't going to be silenced. He wasn't scared. But that decision
on the ground, nigga might fuck around, die from a heart attack, all shook when he hear how this 40 sound. I got shot on live, but your mans ain't on live, and I clapped your mans, left him on the ground. They be talking that shit, acting like I'm a bitch, and they know I be sending them shots. And I'm just warming up, you ain't see shit yet. Every month we tagging.
December 12th, 2020. Lloyd had gone out that night on a first date at Jake and Joe's Sports Grill, a popular restaurant in Woburn, Massachusetts. He was probably expecting a low-key evening, good food, maybe some conversation. But what he didn't know was that two men were already watching him from outside. Poliaski Jean-Francois, 38, and his associate, Eric Mills. They weren't there by chance. They had tracked him down. Jean-Francois and Mills pulled into the Restaurant S parking lot in a black sedan and sat there for a while. They weren't going in to eat. They were waiting. After some time, they moved their car into a neighboring hotel parking lot that gave them a clear view of the restaurant Breces entrance. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment shooting. This was premeditated. When Lloyd finally walked out of the restaurant, Jean-Francois and Mills got out of the car and approached him fast. In a matter of seconds, over 20 rounds were fired, with Lloyd struck 13 times. It was a full-on execution in the middle of a public parking lot, right outside a busy restaurant full of customers. Panic erupted. People ducked for cover. Multiple 911 calls came pouring in. Jean-Francois fled the scene in the sedan but didn't get far. Less than half a mile away, he crashed the car into a tree at the intersection of School Street and Forest Park Road. From there, he ran on foot, hoping to blend into the neighborhood. Police found him shortly after, calmly walking on Alfred Street. He told officers a story, said he'd been at Jake and Joe's, and that he'd been shot at, claiming he ran off in fear. At first, police brought him in as a witness, but surveillance footage soon proved otherwise. Jean-Francois wasn't a victim, he was the shooter. In his pocket, police found a key to the crashed car. Inside the vehicle, they discovered gunshot residue. Along the paths where Jean-Francois and Mills had run, police found two semi-automatic pistols discarded on the ground. The evidence was overwhelming. In November 2024, after a 12-day trial, Jean-Francois was found guilty of first-degree murder, assault with a dangerous weapon, and carrying a firearm without a license. He's now awaiting sentencing. Eric Mills faces the same charges and is expected in court shortly after. The official story is clear. A man was murdered. Justice was served. But the unofficial story, the one people in certain circles already knew, was that this was retaliation, a street message written in bullets. In a public statement, District Attorney Marion Ryan said Polyaski Jean-Francois targeted Lloyd Borgella and waited for him to exit a restaurant where he had gone on a first date. When Mr. Borgella stepped outside, the defendant opened fire in the public parking lot of the busy restaurant. She continued, this increasing use of firearms to gun people down and create enormous public safety risks cannot be tolerated. But what wasn't said in that press release was what led up to it. This wasn't just gun violence. This was about pride, ego, music, and neighborhood turf. A diss track, a live stream, a beef that started online and ended in blood. To outsiders, Lloyd was a victim. But to those who knew him as LV Slim, he was a man who stood on business, who refused to back down when challenged. And unfortunately, that code of pride and retaliation can be a deadly one. Woburn is a quiet place. This kind of thing doesn't usually happen there, and that's part of what made it so shocking to the public. But to those who understood the street politics involved, the only surprise was where it happened, not why. Now, 5 years later, justice has officially been served in the eyes of the law. But the scars this case left on both sides of the conflict still linger. Lloyd is gone, Jean-Francois is locked up, Mills will likely follow. And yet the streets they came from still echo with the same energy, the same rules, and the same risks. This wasn't just a murder. It was the final chapter of a street story told in lives, lyrics, and live streams.